The girl who gave her breath to a stranger, unknowingly saving a billionaire's heart. The wind had teeth that night, sharp, biting, relentless. It howled between the tall buildings like a warning no one wanted to hear. Snow clung to the sidewalks, slush-soaked shoes, and people moved with their heads down, bundled in thick coats, eyes fixed ahead, as if looking sideways might cost them warmth. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. Lila stood at the bus stop, teeth clenched to keep them from chattering. Her coat was too thin, a donated thing with a missing button and lining that had given up years ago. She curled her fingers around the inhaler in her pocket like it was a talisman. Her chest already felt tight, her breath coming short in the icy air. But it was a feeling she knew well. She'd lived with asthma her whole life, ever since she was a little girl coughing through cold nights in shelters with her mother. Clutched in her other arm was a stack of used textbooks, the corners frayed and covers faded. She had just come from tutoring a neighbor's daughter in exchange for a few dollars and a sandwich. Her bus was late. Of course it was. As she shifted her weight from foot to foot, trying to keep circulation in her toes, a sound drifted through the blur of city noise. A faint, rattling breath. It was barely audible over the engines and footsteps, but she heard it. Turning, she spotted him. An old man sat hunched near the curb, half hidden by a newspaper vending box. His coat was torn, the sleeves soaked. His fingers, curled inwards, shook uncontrollably. But it was the way his chest rose and fell in uneven jerks that made her stomach knot. He wasn't just cold. He was suffocating. No one stopped. People stepped around him like he was part of the sidewalk. An obstacle, not a man. Some glanced, and then looked away even faster, ashamed to feel nothing. Lila hesitated. Her heart pounded louder than the traffic. Her own breath came tight now, she needed her inhaler soon. But something about the man, the way his head drooped, the way he seemed to shrink smaller with every passing second, it reminded her of someone. Her grandfather, maybe. Or the way her mother had looked that night the shelter turned them away. She stepped off the curb without thinking. Her shoes splashed in the freezing slush. Kneeling beside him, she gently touched his arm. "Sir." Her voice cracked. "Can you breathe?" The old man didn't respond. Just a faint grunt, the whites of his eyes barely visible beneath drooping lids. Her hand shook as she reached into her pocket. She pulled out the inhaler. Old, scarred, nearly out, but it had 1 or 2 puffs left. "Enough. Here," she whispered, lifting it to his mouth. "Just breathe in slowly. Like this." She helped him hold it. His hands were like ice. She guided him, whispering softly until the medicine took. After a few moments, his chest moved easier. The wheeze softened. He didn't say a word. He only looked at her, eyes watery, lips trembling, as if he couldn't believe someone had stopped. As if kindness was a foreign language. Lila offered a weak smile. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to thank me." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. She pressed the inhaler into his palm. "You keep it." Then she stood, wiping the wet from her knees with fingers stiff from cold. Her chest felt tighter, but she ignored it. The bus was coming. She didn't look back as she boarded, didn't know that someone from across the street had been watching the whole time. Or that this quiet moment, born from pain and compassion, was the beginning of something far greater than she could imagine. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, it was just a girl. And a man. And a little air. The next morning, the city was quieter, the snow having blanketed everything in stillness. Lila walked the same cracked sidewalk she had the night before, her breath visible in the cold. Her jacket clung damp against her sweater, and her fingers burned from gripping her book bag. But her thoughts weren't on school, or the math quiz she hadn't studied for, or even her asthma, which had made the night difficult without her inhaler. She was thinking about the man. As she neared the corner where she'd last seen him, her eyes scanned every shadow and stoop. The bench was there, the vending box, the light post flickering weakly overhead. But he was gone. Completely. The cardboard he'd been sitting on was gone. No coat. No footsteps. Just a patch of ice where he had been huddled, shivering and wheezing the night before. It was as if the city had swallowed him. Lila paused, staring at the spot. She knew what it was like to be forgotten by the world, to vanish between cracks no one cared to look down. But this didn't feel like that. Something was off. The way he looked at her, that haunting expression, not just of pain, but of disbelief that someone had helped him, it clung to her. A voice interrupted her thoughts. You looking for someone? She turned to see Mr. Ramos, the fruit vendor, setting up his stall across the street. He was one of the few familiar faces in her daily routine. There was an older man sitting right there last night, Lila said, pointing. He was having trouble breathing. I gave him my inhaler, but now he's gone. Ramos frowned thoughtfully. I got here early. Didn't see anyone. Just fresh snow. Lila's lips parted to say something more, but nothing came. She nodded slowly and turned away. As she walked toward the bus stop, something strange settled in her chest, not fear, not worry. Just a feeling, quiet but persistent, like the way her mother used to hum before bedtime. Something wasn't finished. Her bus pulled up. She stepped aboard and slid into a seat near the back, staring out the window at the corner as it disappeared behind fogged glass. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from the cold. The inhaler she'd given away had been her only one. The pharmacy wouldn't refill it until next week. She hadn't told anyone. She couldn't afford to. At school, she moved through the day in a haze. Her teachers spoke, but their words blurred. She saw lips moving, chalk on boards, pages turning, but it all felt distant. At lunch, she barely touched her sandwich. Her chest ached more than usual, a low, dragging pressure she ignored. After school, she took the long way home, passing by the same street corner again. Still empty. The only trace left was the imprint her own knees had made in the snow. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that a sleek black car had been parked a block away that night. Inside, behind tinted glass, someone had been watching her kneel down, watching her give without asking anything in return. A girl with nothing offering the one thing she needed to someone who, by all appearances, had even less. Now, in a towering office miles away, a man stared at her face captured on a grainy photo. His fingers hovered over a name scrawled in a notepad. Lila. He tapped the edge of the image once, then twice, then picked up the phone. Find her, he said quietly. Find out who she is. Everything. Back on the street corner, Lila stood one last time, eyes scanning the empty sidewalk. Then she turned, unaware that her story was no longer hers alone. The day began like any other for Lila, too early, too cold, and too quiet. The sun hadn't yet risen when she slipped out the door of the small basement apartment she shared with her mother. It was always a silent exit. Her mother, who worked 2 night shifts back-to-back, was finally getting her rest. Lila would often leave a thermos of tea by her bedside before heading to school. Some mornings, she'd whisper a quiet goodbye. Today, she just glanced back once, then pulled the door closed behind her. Her chest still felt heavy. The cold worsened it. With each breath, a tightness coiled just beneath her ribs. She clutched her side, slowing her steps, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Missing school wasn't an option, not when every class was a stepping stone to something better. Or so she told herself. She passed the old corner again, as if drawn by something unexplainable. Still no sign of the man. Just a gust of wind and the crunch of salt beneath her shoes. She continued on. When she reached school, the front office secretary waved her down as she entered. Lila? Someone left this for you. The woman held out an envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy. No name on the front. Just to the girl who gave her inhaler. Her heart skipped. She took it with trembling fingers. Who? The secretary shook her head. Some man dropped it off early this morning. Said it was urgent. Lila stared at the envelope like it might vanish. She walked down the hallway, ignoring the noise of students, lockers slamming, the usual chatter. She sat on a bench near the staircase and turned the envelope over in her hands, heart pounding. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of thick, ivory paper. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned. It read, You didn't ask for thanks. You didn't ask for anything. But kindness like yours deserves to be remembered. You gave me breath when no one else saw me. Let this help you breathe a little easier. Tucked beneath the note was a prepaid prescription card for a full year's supply of her inhaler medication. Her eyes widened. She blinked rapidly, her throat tightening. No one knew. She hadn't told anyone about giving it away, or that she couldn't afford a new one until next week. No one. Her fingers trembled as she looked deeper into the envelope. There was more. A second paper, an acceptance letter. It was from the city's most prestigious music and arts mentorship program, one she had secretly applied to months ago, never expecting a reply. She'd never even finished the full application. The final requirement, a sponsor's letter, had been left blank. She hadn't known anyone who qualified. But there it was. Approved. Funded. Backdated. Her name in bold. Tears spilled before she could stop them. A few students passed by, laughing and shoving each other, oblivious to the world cracking open on a quiet bench by the stairs. She folded the letter back into the envelope and held it tightly to her chest. Someone had seen her. Someone had seen through her. But who? The question gnawed at her as the day went on. She floated through her classes in a daze, trying to match the elegant handwriting to someone, anyone she knew. But nothing fit. By the time the final bell rang, she had more questions than answers. But one thing was certain, whoever that old man had been, he wasn't just some forgotten soul on a frozen curb. And now, someone was watching her from a distance. Someone with power, influence, and a reason. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The real test of her heart was still to come. It was Friday afternoon when everything changed again. Lila stepped into her apartment building after school, her cheeks red from the wind, her hands numb from carrying her books without gloves. She barely noticed the man standing in the lobby at first. He was sharply dressed, in a dark gray overcoat and polished shoes, too clean for this part of town. He looked like someone who had made a wrong turn. But he wasn't lost. He was waiting. The building's hallway smelled like dust and damp socks. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. And yet, this man stood in the middle of it all as if he belonged nowhere else. He turned the moment he saw her. Lila. She froze, one foot still on the bottom step. Her heart stumbled in her chest. Yes. He gave a small, polite smile. My name is Victor Hayes. I work with the Evers Foundation. She blinked. She'd heard that name before. It was printed on the acceptance letter tucked safely in her backpack. I hope I'm not intruding, he continued. May I speak with you for a moment? I promise, it's important. Still dazed, Lila nodded and led him to the worn-down bench outside the mailboxes. Victor didn't waste time. Your application to the mentorship program was reviewed last month. Normally, late submissions or incomplete applications are rejected, but your name was personally flagged by someone very high up. Lila stared at him. Flagged. Yes, he said. Recommended, actually. Sponsored in full. No fees, no waiting list, immediate acceptance. But I didn't. I never finished it, she whispered. I didn't have a sponsor. Victor gave a small nod, his voice softening. Someone saw you. Someone who believes in what you are capable of, even if you don't see it yet. Lila's throat tightened. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or scared. But who? Why? Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. He prefers to stay anonymous. For now. But he asked me to give you this. She took it with shaking fingers. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Embossed. The same cream color as before. Victor stood. Take your time reading it. And if you choose to accept the mentorship offer, someone will be in touch to arrange transportation, materials, and tutoring. Tutoring, she echoed, bewildered. He smiled again kindly this time. You're not just in the program, Lila. You're at the top of the list. Before she could ask anything more, he nodded and turned, disappearing out the front door like a shadow swallowed by sunlight. She sat on the bench for a long moment, heart pounding against her ribs like a warning bell. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note. No signature. No return address. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness reveals the rarest kind of strength. You gave your breath to a stranger. Let me give you space to fly. Lila read the words again and again, tears rising fast and hot. It wasn't just help. It wasn't just charity. Someone saw her, saw beyond the coat with the missing button, the books clutched tight to her chest, the inhaler nearly out of medicine. Someone had seen her heart. But who? She didn't know it yet. But just 2 blocks away, a sleek town car sat quietly parked, its windows tinted, its driver waiting for instruction. And in the back seat, the old man. Shaved, in a tailored suit, no longer hunched or gasping, watched the building with eyes that remembered. He said nothing, just nodded once, then gave a quiet command. Now we wait. Lila had never touched a grand piano before. Sure, she'd seen one. Through windows of music stores she could never enter, on posters, or in short clips she managed to watch during free Wi-Fi hours at the library. But now, seated in the city's most prestigious arts center, she found herself inches from its ivory keys. It looked less like an instrument and more like a creature waiting to be awakened. She didn't dare press a note. The music room was vast and echoing, polished floors reflecting soft light from arched windows. Gold-lettered names lined the walls, famous composers, prodigies, people whose lives had been carved from talent and privilege. Lila's name did not belong here. Not yet. Her palms were clammy. Her breathing still uneven. No inhaler could fix the storm inside her chest now. The instructor had stepped out to take a call. She was alone, or so she thought. From behind the half-closed door, she heard murmurs. That's the girl. Yes. Lila. She doesn't look like much. She's not supposed to. But she's the one. Lila froze, hand hovering over the keys. She recognized Victor's voice, soft but firm. The other voice, unfamiliar, older, skeptical. There was a pause. Then Victor continued. He said she reminded him of someone. A longer silence followed. Footsteps. Then a slow reply. Well, let's hope she's worth the effort. The voices faded down the corridor. Lila sat there, still as stone, the words repeating over and over in her mind. He said she reminded him of someone. He, the man who had sponsored her, the man who had sent the envelopes, the one who, somehow, had known about that cold night, about the inhaler, about everything. She stood and walked to the doorway, peeking into the hallway. Empty. That afternoon's lesson passed in a blur. She didn't remember playing, though the instructor had praised her ear and called her naturally expressive. None of it landed. Her thoughts were stuck on those voices, on the man in the shadows, the one pulling all the strings but never stepping forward. Who was he? Why did she remind him of someone? And most importantly, was this really about kindness, or was something deeper unfolding? When the lesson ended, she lingered behind as the other students filtered out. She sat at the edge of the window and watched the city below, a sweep of rooftops and fading sunlight. Somewhere out there, he was watching her. Not in a threatening way, but in the way you look at a puzzle you already know the answer to. As the sky dimmed, Victor appeared once more in the doorway. Do you need a ride home? He asked. Lila hesitated. Can I ask you something first? He nodded. The man who helped me, why hasn't he said anything to me himself? Victor's eyes didn't flicker. He stepped into the room and looked at the piano. He's waiting for the right moment. Some truths don't unfold all at once. They require timing. Lila frowned. Timing for what? Victor smiled, but there was a sadness in it. For you to be ready. She didn't understand. Not yet. But the air felt heavier as she left the music center that evening, and the wind carried something new in it, not just cold, but expectation. Change. A future waiting to be opened like one of the envelopes that had first arrived without warning. And behind tinted glass, parked again where no one noticed, the old man watched. He was no longer a ghost on a street corner. But she had seen him when no one else had. And soon, she would learn why. Saturday mornings were sacred for Lila and her mother. No alarms. No rushing. Just the comfort of borrowed time. Shared tea in chipped mugs, warmth from a broken space heater, and silence filled with unspoken love. On this particular morning, the sunlight tried its best to reach into the small apartment, but clouds still ruled the sky. Lila sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. She hadn't yet told her mother everything about the mentorship program, the strange man, the envelopes. There were too many pieces she didn't understand herself. And some part of her still feared saying it aloud might make it vanish. Her mother, Rosa, watched her with quiet curiosity. You've been different lately. Lila looked up. Different? Quieter. But your eyes look brighter. Like you've been holding something in. Lila hesitated. I think someone's helping me. But I don't know why. Or who. Rosa's brows drew together with concern, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached over and placed an old shoebox on the table. Its lid was worn, corners frayed. I was going through some of your grandmother's things last night, she said softly. Thought you might like to see. Lila opened it gently. Inside were faded photos, old letters, a scarf that still smelled faintly of lavender. She pulled out a black and white photo of a much younger Rosa, laughing, hair curled, eyes full of fire. But the one that caught her attention was tucked beneath it. It was older. A photo of a young woman, maybe in her late teens. Sitting at a piano. Lila gasped. The resemblance was striking. Who is this? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Rosa smiled wistfully. My mother. Your grandmother. Her name was Alma. She played. Rosa chuckled softly. She was magic. She could hear a song once and play it back perfectly. She dreamed of conservatories, of concert halls, but dreams like that didn't survive long in our world. Lila stared at the photograph, something fluttering deep in her chest. She remembered the envelope. You reminded him of someone. Was it her grandmother? She traced the piano in the photo, then the girl's delicate fingers resting on the keys. There was a softness in her eyes, but also sadness, like she knew her music might never be heard by the world. Rosa took the photo from her, turning it over. A name was scrawled on the back in faded ink. To Alma, don't ever stop playing. Yours always, H. Lila's breath caught. H, she whispered. Rosa blinked. I forgot that was there. Who was H? Rosa thought for a moment, frowning. Your grandmother never spoke much about her past. She was always too busy trying to keep us afloat. But there was a boy she used to write to, I think. Rich family. She met him through a church recital or something like that, but he disappeared. She said he left for Europe and never came back. Lila stared at the name again. Her hands trembled. H. The man in the car. The envelopes. The sponsorship. The voice at the piano room door. She reminded him of someone. It wasn't her. It was Alma. She wasn't the beginning of this story. She was the echo of something unfinished. Lila stood abruptly, her heart pounding. Mom, do you have any more photos of him? Rosa shook her head. That's the only one. But it was enough. Lila turned toward the window, staring out into the gray morning. Somewhere out there was a man who hadn't forgotten. A man who had been waiting. Not just for her kindness, but for her. Or rather, for a chance to honor the girl who once gave him music. And now, he was ready to step forward. The next knock would not be on a door. It would be on the past itself. The invitation came the next day. A cream-colored envelope, as elegant and mysterious as the others. But this one bore no mystery in its message. It was direct, clear, and final. Your presence is requested at the Evers Hall, 6 p.m. sharp. Dress as you are. Your journey ends and begins tonight. Lila stared at the letter in disbelief. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since she'd read the back of that photograph. She barely slept. She couldn't eat. All she could think about was the name H and how her grandmother's past had somehow risen again, folding Lila into a story she never knew she belonged to. Now, the moment was here. The Evers Hall was nothing like the cold streets of her neighborhood. It gleamed like something out of a movie, Al. Chandeliers dripping gold, marble floors that echoed with every footstep, velvet drapes that whispered secrets. She entered with trembling hands, dressed in her worn coat and scuffed shoes, feeling like a single snowflake in a palace built of stars. A woman in black greeted her at the door. Right this way, Miss Lila. She led Lila into a domed chamber filled with warm light. At its center sat a piano, a grand, glistening thing, untouched, waiting. And beside it stood him, the old man. Only, he wasn't old anymore. He was dressed in a navy suit, crisp and dignified, though time still lined his face. But the frailty was gone. He stood tall, a quiet power in his presence. His eyes, the same ones she saw that winter day, were softer now, brighter. He smiled the moment he saw her. Hello, Lila. She took a breath. It was you, wasn't it? He nodded slowly. Yes. You were the man in the street that night. Yes. And the one who sent the letters. Yes. She blinked hard, her voice thick. Why? Why all of this? He took a step toward her, then gestured for her to sit on the piano bench. She did, slowly. He sat beside her, close enough to hear her heart racing. 50 years ago, he began, a girl changed my life. She didn't have much, but she had music in her soul and fire in her hands. Her name was Alma. Lila's breath caught. I loved her, he said simply. But I was young. Afraid. My family sent me away, told me it was a foolish dream. I never saw her again. I made money. I built empires. But I lost the one song that mattered. He looked at Lila now, and his voice cracked. And then, one winter evening, I sat on a curb, half frozen, forgotten, and a girl who looked like her knelt beside me. Lila's eyes filled with tears. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just helped me breathe. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn object. Her inhaler. I kept it, he said. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of the breath someone once gave me. Your kindness brought me back to life, Lila, and I couldn't let it go unnoticed. He stood slowly, gesturing toward the piano. I can give you everything now, schools, stages, scholarships. But that's not the gift that matters. What matters is that you gave before you were given. You shared your breath, your warmth, your heart. Lila sat still, silent tears tracing her cheeks. He stepped back and bowed his head gently. I can't thank Alma, but I can honor her, through you. Lila looked down at the keys, then back at the man who had once been a ghost on a street corner. And then, without hesitation, she began to play. Softly at first, tentatively, but then stronger, notes blooming like spring through frost. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Music for her grandmother. Music for the man she saved. Music for a girl who once gave everything, and now was about to receive more than she ever dreamed. The hall echoed with melody, and the past, at last, was whole again. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from and drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Lila's act of kindness resonate with you? What do you think of Victor Hayes' surprising reveal? Share your thoughts on the unexpected connection between Lila and her grandmother, Alma. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.